everyone. So yeah, my name is Roberts. When I thought how to tell my story, I figured I can actually tell it in 3 bullet points. If I have to sum up story of Nordigen, it boils down to a lot of beer, a lot of sweat, and tons of mistakes. So this is really the story of Nordigen in 10 seconds. And I thought maybe instead of kind of giving you kind of this bar type of story how Nordigen was built, I'm gonna actually skip to the end of it and tell what are my takeaways from building the Nordigen and how we approach several questions and problems. And in particular, in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm gonna focus on 3 things. I'm gonna give you my takeaways on how we built our team, how we actually became with our idea, and how we built up our product. But for the context, for those of you who don't know what Nordigen is, Nordigen in very essence is an analytics company, and we work with banks, lenders, and fintechs. And in particular, we help these companies to look in your bank accounts and really extrapolate a lot of insights out of it. So what Nordigen helps to do is like we can tell how much you earn, where do you work, are you married or not, what type of interests you have, how often you travel. So really kind of very in-depth information that then these companies that can use to give you more tailored products or better evaluate when you apply for a loan, for example. Nordigen was founded 5 years ago, and as of now, we have a team of almost 30 people, and we work in, I think, 18 or 19 countries, which should know better because I'm a founder of a company. Anyway, so it's like close to 20 markets we work in. And yeah, that's like the kind of very kind of basic introduction to what Nordigen is. And when I think about what are my takeaways from building up Nordigen, I think the one key takeaway that applied to every single topic I thought about is that you actually learn by doing. And that's probably the reason why second-time founders are, statistically at least, much more successful than the first-time founders, is that you have to really kind of get your hands dirty yourself and try things to build yourself. And that probably would be the one and single kind of suggestion I would say to anyone, is that whatever kind of questions you have on any topics, just jump in. Believe me, you'll find the right answers much quicker in that way. But then if I think about the kind of the topics I already mentioned before, if I kind of think about the team, to my mind, team is the kind of very fundament of any company you're going to build out. Because if you have crappy team, then it doesn't matter how good your idea or product is, you're not going to be able to build it out. So that's why I think that over time, and I found that it even as a more important thing, is that the role of the key role of a founder is actually hiring people. Your role is to find the best team around you, be a visionary or the captain of the ship or whatever you call it, to find people who will be able kind of to stand behind you and kind of sail in very far seas. And I think that is a thing very often overlooked, is that I remember the early days of Nordigen is that we couldn't figure out how to hire people because there was like this idea that didn't make any money, and besides, like, it's an analytics company that works with banks, so it's definitely not the most sexy idea to work with. So everybody wanted to work in Edurio at that time. So I think the one thing we figured out is that you have to we call it like hacky ways, but like you have to create like very intuitive guerrilla type ways how to hire people. And the one example, let's say we had to hire a data scientist, and like if you are a startup with no money, that's like a big challenge. So what we did, we actually went to University of Latvia and said, we're gonna create a competition with the money prize, and it's like something, I don't know, 100 to 200 euros, which like for students, like a reasonable amount of money to kind of put their effort in. So we had this kind of fake competition, and we simply figured that we're gonna offer employment position for the top person from that competition. And we did, and she accepted the offer, and we got our first data scientist. And I think we would never be able to hire anyone from kind of creating a job ad and then like doing a proper kind of hiring type of process. So I think one takeaway is you really have to figure ways how you're going to attract people to your company. You have to be a very strong visionary. So what are you building at? Why should you join the team? And obviously after time, when the kind of the ball has rolled, like you you build out a team around, so you have much better argumentation for it. But at least in early days, you have to really figure ways how to approach people. Another thing I would suggest is I would suggest hiring people that are only smarter than you. So my take on working in Nordigen is that eventually I want to be the dumbest person in the company. And the point of that is that you really want to hire I think it's worth hiring the superstars around you. Really worth hiring people who know their kind of domain and are able to kind of excel it to kind of whatever stratosphere. And I think that is one of my takeaways is that we want to hire people who are results oriented and people who can work independently. I think the context here is that once your team starts growing, like once you pass like 5-10 people, it's you want people who can kind of take this domain and without your input really take it to next level. You simply show them direction and they'll do the rest of the thing. And I think that also goes in hand that one of the mistakes we did early on is that, and obviously we were budget strapped, and I can totally relate with Ernest on it's not easy to build started with almost no money, but it really pays off to hire like expensive people, and not just because they're expensive, but like obviously it had to correlate with their abilities. But if I would have to redo it again, I would definitely, in some cases, choose for hiring, let's say, 2 or 3 times more expensive people. But sometimes people that are even multiple times more expensive can generate output like much more than like a group of people. And another thing is that early on, and I think it applies to many startups, we kind of it's because as you create a small family, like a unit, right? So because like you're every day together working long hours, going to accelerator programs, so it kind of becomes kind of very friendly environment. And I think one mistake we did is that we kept some people too long in our teams. So my suggestion to everyone would be that you should make a quick decision whether or not you want to keep people in teams. Because whenever we were like on this 50-50 and whenever we left, whenever we kind of kept people, that has always kind of become like a larger problem eventually. So make quick decisions about people, because again, because your people are the ones that are driving your company or kind of producing the most output. They're the ones that you should have the right team as quickly as possible. And I would, although it sounds very harsh, like you have to fire people if you need to fire people, right? And that's something where many founders don't have the guts to do it. But if you look at I think the most kind of prominent companies out there, they are ruthless with hiring and firing people, like hire and fire fast. I think that's what many say. So I think if I would have to focus on whatever, on like in my early days, if I'd have to focus on something more, I would definitely put more attention to my team. So how do I hire people? How do I hire the best talent? And because also, if you are going for investment, that's going to be the first thing investors are going to look at. They will not look at they will not evaluate your idea or your product. They will actually look at your team and invest in team. And I think nowadays it's I think it's even more apparent that early stage investments are around team, not product. So yeah, I think that's kind of a couple of takeaways from founding a team. The next thing would be how we came up with the idea, and I think that brings me back to the very first bullet point I said, that a lot of Nordigen stories around kind of sitting and drinking beer. So this was another thing, is that the way we figured what to do is I think at that time we went through around 100 ideas. So it was more like a process on thinking, looking at specific industry and thinking what type of problems this industry is facing and what type of problems this industry is not capable of resolving as kind of separate units, like, or companies. So there was like a lot of pitching. We went to I think on a weekly basis, we had some like around 10 ideas we went out and pitched to companies. So we are totally open. We said, all right, we have these ideas and we simply want to get your feedback. So that's the way actually Nordigen was founded, is that I think that was definitely not the first idea that was on the table, and definitely not the idea with the highest, at least in our, based on our intuition, not with the highest probability of succeeding. But I think if I have to generalize that process of making idea, is that I think that is the interesting thing about creating a company, is that there's no one true way how to find the right idea. And I think if you would kind of go around and share this process, I would be quite confident that each one of us would have quite a different way how we came to our idea. But I think one practical suggestion from my side would be that I find that if you are working in an industry or are connected to one industry in particular, most probably you'll have a better insights what type of problems this industry has. And then I think it's much easier to formulate your kind of proposal to solve the problem. And I think the second suggestion is that I have a few of my friends who kind of want to meet up and talk about like making a startup, and then they pitch me an idea, and then I'll tell them, it's not me who should you pitch. You should pitch to your potential customers, right? And you don't have to create like a super duper solution before you go do it. So my suggestion is that go as soon as possible into market and pitch your idea. And I'm quite confident that for most of the ideas, you can go and pitch without having a single line of code. And the only expensive thing in that process is your time. So you don't literally have to spend a single year on that. And I think that's another beauty about living in Latvia, is that it's like everybody knows everyone. So you can literally, okay, I will not use the word literally, but like it's very easy to go to kind of find people working in kind of right industries. So most probably it's like one or two LinkedIn connections away. So I encourage simply to kind of go in and pitch the right people. So I think that's to couple my takeaways from very early days of Nordigen. And building a product, that's like a whole different whole different story. Like I think I could spend hours on this topic, but I think when I think about building a product, there is a couple very important questions many founders tend to forget. And I think one main question you should always answer in the early days of building out your idea is what type of problem I'm solving. And this is a question I think many forget to answer, and very oftenly forget once they actually build out some product. So what I find is that mostly people start other way around. They build up a technology, and then they want to figure out whom they're gonna sell it to. So I would advise to do other way around. So figure out what type of problem you want to solve, and then only then build technology. And I think that also nicely fits into many early pitfalls of what companies have, is that, as Ernest mentioned, focus is a big issue, right? And I totally agree, is that the more specific problem you can address, the more easier for you it's going to be to focus on the right thing. And I think the next layer of the kind of same question I would answer is really figure whether people want to pay for it or not. So there's a tons of very good ideas. I have quite frequently people write me up and like they ask me, what do you think about my idea? And I say like, yo, your idea is great, but I'm not gonna pay for it, right? And that's a very critical question, is to really figure out what is the kind of part that you can commercialize. Is that there are many great ideas I think I would love to use, or many products or services, but I would not like to pay for them. So, and that's, I think, another thing is that once you have kind of validated your problem and you created some initial kind of MVP or something, is to understand whether somebody wants to pay for it or not. And again, I think the beauty about kind of people and networks and connections is that you can simply go out and ask people whether or not they want to buy, and if they say yes, then simply make them to commit to it. So that's at least what we did, is that get early commitments from people without actually building something, because you should see our early demos. Like I could write a book about how to fail in 100 different ways. And I have learned not to blush anymore in these weird situations, but so just go out and ask people and make them commit. Yeah, I think I see that my clock is running out, but I think the one final thought, yeah, if I would give a message to Roberts 5 years ago, and definitely I was much more like how to say, more like in big visions than more hands-on. But I think the one thing I would say, it's all worth it. And I think the context of this message is that creating a startup is very damn hard. Like the hours and kind of the stress is considerable. And I think that I don't know a single non-hardworking startup founder, or at least successful startup founder. I should add that caveat. But it's definitely a very interesting journey, and I think whatever happens with Nordigen in any months, years, days, I find that the things I have learned, the people I have met, and experiences I've got is doesn't have any euro mark on it. So yeah, that's it from my side. Not so much as a story, much more takeaways from my mistakes over time.